Hi, it's Logan Wells. I'm in the kitchen today. Guess what I'm making? City chicken. It's one of my family favorites. And my older daughter, Brianna, it happens to be her favorite dish. So when I get a chance to make her a home-cooked meal, that's what I will go to. And when I do have them come over, I gotta make a lot of it because it goes lickety-split. What is city chicken? It's not chicken. It's actually chunks of veal and pork that are put on skewers, and it's breaded and then fried or baked. And there's a couple different variations. I kind of do it a little bit like how my mom made it when I was a kid, and that's the way Brianna likes it too. I have had so many people requesting this recipe because really we live in the Cleveland area, and folks all around the country, except for here in Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe the Detroit area, they don't know what city chicken is. They've never heard of it. It's a regional dish here that was brought over by the Polish, Ukraine, Russians. And the reason they called it city chicken was because back in the day, in the Depression era, chicken was actually more expensive than veal or pork, believe it or not. So they would have to pay a little bit extra to have chicken brought in from the rural areas. So they would make something that was fashioned out of beef scraps, pork, veal, beef, and kind of mush it together and put it on a little stick and make it look like a mock chicken leg. And that's how it originally started. But through the years, it's kind of changed a little bit. And like I said, there's different variations of making it. This is my favorite way, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Now, I went shopping yesterday, and veal prices were just ridiculous. So I just bought the pork chunks. When I was a little kid, I remember my mom going to the store, and they actually, in this area, would actually sell packages of what was called city chicken. And it was a mix of the veal and the pork. But now it's kind of hard to find because of the veal prices. So if you happen to see veal on sale, get some in the chunks and freeze it to have when you want to make traditional city chicken. So it starts off with a couple packages of the veal and or pork chunks, and then you're going to put it in a little flour, seasoned flour, egg wash, and then roll it in some breadcrumbs. And then we're going to fry it with some onions. And a lot of folks bake it. I don't particularly like it that way because I think it's kind of drier. And I like to actually simmer it in some chicken bouillon or chicken stock. And after that has simmered and kind of steamed it a bit, it tends to make the meat get a little more tender, and kind of just fall apart, and it's delicious. So I hope you like this recipe. Let's get cooking. So I've got my rinsed and squeezed dry as best as possible pork in a bowl, and I'm going to have some flour here, and we're going to mix up those eggs and add a little bit of water to it to make an egg wash. And then we've got breadcrumbs. Those are the seasoned breadcrumbs. And I've got a pan over here that I'm going to be adding some butter and some vegetable oil. And when we put the breaded cubes in, we're gonna fry those until they are lightly brown. Don't forget, take your eggshells that were left over from when you breaded the meat, throw them down your garbage disposal. Help sharpen the blades. So I've breaded all my pieces of pork. They're all evenly nice and breaded. And here's where you can make the choice as to whether or not you just want to fry them separately, or you can use those little skewers. And that's when you would just put them on there, about 4 or 5 pieces each. I don't like the way that one went on there, it's gonna fall off. There we go. There you go. And then we're just gonna fry those in oil. I'm going to do the rest of them today just separately, just because I have so many pieces here, and I like getting an even brownness all around all 4 sides of the pork before we actually simmer them. So right now, I'm gonna put some butter, and you can use olive oil or vegetable oil, whichever you like, and get that be about a 1/4 inch. Don't need a whole lot. Once that's melted and hot, we can start putting these pieces in and evenly brown them. I'm going to keep an eye on them so that they get to a nice golden brown. You need to add more butter and a little more oil to the pan. You can do that. And then just give it a little shake there to mix that up. I'm going to put one more platter over here to put my browned pieces in. Okay, while that last batch is browning, I'm going to take one large onion and I want to cut it in half. Get that bad end off of there. And you could chop these, but I like to actually do like slivers, just very thin slivers of onion, because when our pork comes out of there, we're going to take these and lightly brown them. And then, oh boy, that's when the smell in the house starts to get really good. Nothing like onions frying, right? Okay, do this side. Get that little chunk out of there. There we go. And then just very thinly slice. Now the onion's not only going to add flavor to the meat, but it's also going to be part of our gravy. Some people like to eat these just the way they are, and I like to make a little gravy out of the onions and some of the drippings, and I add some chicken broth, or you can use 1 or 2 bouillon cubes with some water that is dissolved and add that. And then we're going to steam them right here in the pan with a cover on them. And that will cook for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll see how everything is. And once those are done, we'll take the meat out, and then we'll show you how to make the gravy. The other thing you can do while those are browning is to start peeling your potatoes. We love to have this with mashed potatoes because it's going to have a really good gravy from this, and it just goes really well with it. Also tonight I'm going to make some sweet corn. And it's the middle of October, but I've still got plenty of fresh garden tomatoes coming in too, so we're gonna slice some of those up. And then I made, oh gosh, six loaves of zucchini bread this afternoon as well, with some zucchini that's still coming in from the garden as well. So we're gonna have zucchini bread, sliced tomatoes, sweet corn, mashed potatoes, and the city chicken. So after all the meat has come out, we're just going to add a little bit more oil, maybe a couple tablespoons, if that, and we'll stir this around, and we're going to start breaking up those onions in it. Break them up. You can turn the heat down to about medium. We don't want these to burn. Make sure that they're all broken up good. That one kind of stuck together. Now here's where there's some different recipes. I know some people actually take the skewers and put them onto a baking sheet after they've lightly browned them in the oil and bake them in the oven for about 40 minutes. I personally don't care for that because I feel like the meat is a little drier, makes it a little tougher. I'm going to cook it along with these fried onions. We're going to put all the meat back into the pan, and then we're going to add either, you can do chicken bouillon and water, or you can just get some chicken stock. I got one of these small ones because I know that's about all I'm going to need. You don't need a whole lot. It's just going to be enough to kind of help steam the meat and make it very, very tender and juicy. And then with the rest of this, we're going to make a gravy to go over it. Okay, so our onions have gotten nice and lightly browned, translucent. This is where I like to add a little bit of parsley. And we're just gonna take that and kind of shake it over that. Let it get a little fragrant in the oil. Kind of stir that around. At this point, there's not a whole lot of oil or butter left in here. I mean, I think we're left mostly with butter at this point. And this is where you're going to add your chicken stock. So I pour this in there. And that's about a cup of liquid. And I'm going to turn this down to the lowest temperature that I have on my stove, which is simmer, low simmer. Okay, got that all mixed up. We might have to add a little bit of water to this, but I'm going to just slide the meat pieces back into the pan. There you go. And then we're going to put a cover on it. And keep an eye on that. You might need to add some water to it. You don't want it to dry out. You want to have some liquid in there that we're going to end up making the gravy with. So this should simmer for about 40 minutes. So while our meat's cooking, I'm going to start making our mashed potatoes. I've peeled and washed my potatoes, and before I quarter them up to put them in my saucepan, I'm going to take my potato peels and put them in my little garbage disposal over here. It's not really garbage disposal. It's actually for composting. And when this fills up with coffee grounds, eggshells, any kind of vegetable peelings or fruit peelings, then we just take it to the backyard and dump it in the compost pile. Free dirt in the spring. We're going to check our meat, and it looks like there's got a good little gravy kind of forming there. If you find that there's not enough liquid in there, you can always add some water, maybe about a half cup at a time. You want it to be just about a ½ inch of liquid on the bottom. Recover and let that keep simmering. Once they come to a boil, you can turn down the heat. Put on a lid. Those should cook for about 20 to 25 minutes till the potatoes are tender. So here's some of that fresh zucchini bread, which is cooled down, just made today. And we've got some really nice tomatoes I'm going to slice up. Sometimes I like to do them with the mozzarella and some basil, a little olive oil, but today just a nice slice with salt and pepper sounds really good with this. So the corn is cooking, the potatoes are just about done. That has like sealed itself. That's hysterical. Corn is in the hot water. Just put it in, and the potatoes are done. So we're gonna drain those and smash them up with some butter and a little milk. Okay, here's a little something we have in our house that we differ on. So my husband and I have this discrepancy every time we go to make sweet corn. He believes that you need to cook corn. So he takes a pot of water, he puts the corn into it, brings it to a boil, and then continues to cook it for 20 to 30 minutes, and sometimes even adds milk or sugar to the pot, believing that it's going to sweeten up the corn. I'm a firm believer that you just need to heat sweet corn. It is called sweet corn because it is just that. It's sweet already all on its own, especially when it's in season and it's fresh. So all you need to do is bring a pot of water to a boil, and after it's boiling, put the corn in, then shut the heat off, put a cover on it, and leave it on for no longer than 5 minutes. You just want to heat it. You can actually eat sweet corn raw. I remember when I was a little girl, my dad would go out into our garden and he would just pick an ear of corn off of the stalk, and we would eat it just raw out there in the garden, and it was delicious. So just heat the corn, and as soon as it's hot, you can put it on a plate and slather it with butter and salt and pepper and enjoy. taking our potatoes and we're just gonna drain them in a colander. Let them dry off. In other words, I mean, let the steam evaporate so you don't have watery potatoes. We have transferred the drained potatoes back into the pot and we're just gonna smash them with a masher. I personally have grown up on mashed potatoes that have been hand mashed like this. I'm not a fan of whipping potatoes with a mixer until they are like, I don't know, tastes like paper mache. I like to have a little bit of texture to the potatoes and add just enough butter and milk to kind of bring them together, but just to have more of a texture of a bite of potato and not just like a whipped mush. Just me. So we'll add some butter, about a 1/4 cup. Let that kind of melt in there, and then we'll add some milk after the butter has melted. All right, little milk. Add some. You can always add it if you need it, but you can't take away if you add too much. So mix that in. I think it might need just a little bit more. Okay, and I'm gonna salt and pepper that. And those will be ready for our gravy. If you have somebody in your house that needs to do low sodium dishes, then you can hold off on the salt. I just do a little bit. I can always add some more to mine if I feel it needs it. There's your pepper. This is a good time if you're having mashed potatoes with salt and pepper. Take your turmeric, because turmeric, which is good for inflammation, is absorbed when you have it with pepper, black pepper. Just a little helpful hint. And those are done. Perfect texture. The city chicken has been simmering in that lovely broth for about 40 to 45 minutes. So I'm going to take the pieces of city chicken out, put them on a plate, and then we're going to make a gravy from the drippings. So I'm going to take a slotted spoon so we can very gently take these out and drain the liquid out, because you want to keep that in the pan so we can make our gravy. Most of your onions will stay in the pan, but some of them will come out with the meat, but that's okay. That's okay. And there's our one on the stick. And we're just going to set these off to the side. Now we're going to add a little more water to the juice that is left there. And we're going to turn that back up to high. Keep stirring. Now we're going to add enough water to equal about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of juice. That's made with the drippings. You've got some of your onions in there and some of the breading, but that's okay. It makes the gravy really yummy. We're going to bring this to a boil. You have a choice to do 2 things here. You can either make a little bit of a roux with some flour and water and just mix that up until it's like a thin paste and add that to your boiling drippings. Stir that in. I like to whisk it until it is thickened a bit, and you can salt and pepper that. My mom used to take a can of cream of mushroom or cream of celery and add that to the drippings that are there and mix that in, and that thickens it up and also adds some additional flavor to it. So we're gonna do the cream of mushroom. So you can see that's come to a boil. We're gonna take our can of cream of mushroom soup. I'm gonna kind of scoop that out. I need a smaller spoon. I guess I'll use a fork. Scoop that out. And then take your whisk and kind of gently whisk that in. You don't want to splash, so be gentle. That liquid is hot. And whisk it up really good. Break up all those pieces of the soup. And let that come back to a boil again. And then you're going to turn it down to a low heat after it comes back to a boil. And you'll find that it's going to thicken up all on its own. You can taste it a little bit and see if it needs any salt or pepper. There we go. Let that come back to a boil. We're going to let that simmer until some of the liquid has evaporated and you've got a nice medium thick gravy. If it doesn't get thick enough for you on its own, you can always mix up a little bit of flour and water to a thin paste and add it to it while it's still boiling. Keep stirring and it will thicken up to a nice gravy. All right, dinner is served. So it's finally done. Yay! We got some fresh Ohio sweet corn, some of our garden tomatoes, fresh mashed potatoes, some homemade zucchini bread. And because this is on the stick, that's why I'm using a knife, but you shouldn't really have to. It should be so fork tender that it should just fall apart. Oh my God. You people all around the country who don't know what city chicken is, you don't know what you're missing. Enjoy. Had to pour myself a glass of wine. Here's to good eating.